She signed a contract to save her mother's life, but she never expected it would rewrite her own. She caught the millionaire's eye in the elevator, and his heart never recovered. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. Now, let us go back to our main character. Rain slicked down the glass walls of the Anderton Tower, painting silver streaks against the night. The elevator doors were closing when Claire Dawson rushed in, clutching a rolled blueprint to her chest. She had just lost her job that morning. 3 years of work erased by one accusation she could not even defend. Her reflection in the mirrored wall stared back, tired eyes, a second-hand coat, and a tremor she tried to hide. "Hold the door, please," she called out, breathless. A hand reached through the narrow gap just in time. The doors slid open again, revealing Julian Mercer, the reclusive real estate tycoon, whose name was etched on half the skyline. He stepped inside, tall and composed in a tailored charcoal suit. The air changed. The hum of the elevator echoed against the silence between them. Claire looked down, realizing her blueprint tube had slipped from her hand. As she knelt to grab it, he bent at the same moment, their hands brushing. His touch was steady, warm, startlingly human. "Thank you," she murmured. "No problem," Julian said softly, pressing the lobby button. The elevator began to move, smooth and soundless. Then, with a sudden jolt, it stopped between floors. The light flickered. Claire's heart skipped. She took a step back, forcing a small laugh to mask her panic. "Of course," she muttered. "Perfect ending to a perfect day." Julian's voice was calm, almost curious. "You are calm for someone who is trapped." She glanced at him, trying to gauge whether he was mocking her. "Panic does not fix broken systems, Mr. Julian," he said. Simply. No title, no last name, just Julian. Minutes stretched in silence, broken only by the hum of emergency lights. Claire leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "I really needed to make it downstairs," she said under her breath. "I had one last hope of talking to someone about a job." He tilted his head. "What do you do?" "I design," she replied quietly. "Houses, buildings, dreams that never get built." She laughed softly, a sound laced with fatigue. "Not that it matters now. I was let go today." Something in her voice drew him in, not the words, but the way she said them. No bitterness, only quiet resilience. The elevator jerked again. Claire lost her balance, and his hand shot out, catching her by the wrist before she could stumble. Their eyes met for a brief, charged second. The emergency lights painted them both in amber. "Looks like you saved me twice tonight," she said, trying to smile. He released her hand slowly. "Maybe the building is trying to introduce us." She raised a brow. "That would be a strange way to start a friendship." He gave a small laugh, low and genuine. "Stranger things have happened." The elevator whirred back to life, gliding smoothly toward the ground floor. When the doors opened, Claire hurried out, clutching her blueprint. She turned to thank him, but Julian was already surrounded by 2 assistants waiting outside. The realization hit her he was not just some stranger. He was Julian Mercer, the billionaire behind Anderton Developments. As she walked into the rain-soaked street, the words he had said echoed in her mind. "Maybe the building is trying to introduce us." She had no idea how true that would turn out to be. The next morning, the rain had not stopped. It washed the glass streets of downtown like a curtain that refused to lift. Claire Dawson stood under a cracked umbrella, waiting for a bus that never came. Her phone vibrated once another message from her. Landlord. Rent overdue. Final notice. She closed her eyes, her breath fogging in the cold. Every part of her life was slipping out of her hands. Her job, her home, her dignity. Inside her worn wallet, the last bill was folded next to a photo of her mother smiling from a hospital bed. The note at the bottom read, "Stay strong, my brave girl." But staying strong was expensive. The surgery her mother needed would cost more than she could make in a year. When the phone rang again, she almost did not answer. "Miss Dawson." This is Dr. Patel from St. Mary's. We need to schedule your mother's procedure soon. I am afraid the window is closing. Her throat tightened. I will find a way, doctor. Please, just give me a little more time. She hung up and looked at her reflection in a puddle mud splashed over her shoes, makeup washed away, eyes tired but still defiant. Then, a black car slowed beside her, the tinted window rolling down. A familiar voice called out, calm and low, "Need a ride?" She turned. It was Julian Mercer, the man from the elevator, the billionaire she had unknowingly snapped at. He was in the back seat, his driver waiting silently. Claire's heart sank. "I am fine," she said quickly. "You should not be here." Julian stepped out anyway, holding an umbrella over both of them. "I heard you lost your position at Leighton Designs." Her eyes widened. "You heard about that?" He nodded. "The project you were blamed for Anderton Plaza was mine. They said you were unprofessional with a client. That client was me." Claire's pulse stumbled. "I was defending the design, not flirting. I thought you were a consultant." "I know," he said quietly, "and I owe you an apology. My silence cost you your job." She wanted to be angry, but exhaustion won. "Apologies do not pay hospital bills." Julian looked at her for a long moment, the rain pooling around their feet. Then he said the strangest thing she could imagine. "What if I told you I can solve both your problems and you can solve one of mine?" She frowned. "What does that mean?" He exhaled. "I need a fiancée, temporarily. My board requires evidence of personal stability before finalizing an international merger. Appearances matter. You are sharp, well-spoken, and you already know how to challenge me. In return, I will cover every cost of your mother's treatment and compensate you generously." Claire blinked, stunned. "You want me to pretend to be engaged to you?" "Yes," he replied simply. "A contractual arrangement. 3 months, public appearances, charity events, nothing more." Her laugh came out short, shaky. "That sounds insane." "Maybe," Julian said, "but sometimes the only way to save what we love is to step into something that does not make sense." The world around them seemed to fade, the noise, the rain, the rush of cars. All that remained was the impossible offer between them. Her heart pounded as she looked at the man she barely knew, a man whose name opened doors and whose signature could change lives. "You are asking me to lie," she said softly. "I am asking you to survive," he replied. "Both of us, in our own ways." She looked down at her mother's photo once more. The words "stay strong" seemed to echo through the storm. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right, Mr. Mercer, tell me where to sign." Julian's expression softened just enough for a trace of warmth to show. "Call me Julian," he said. As the car door opened and she stepped inside, she knew her life was crossing a line that could never be erased. Some contracts are written on paper, others on the heart, and hers had just begun. The contract was written on thick ivory paper, heavy as if it carried more than words. Claire Dawson sat across from Julian Mercer in his penthouse office, a place that felt like another world, steel, glass, and a skyline that shimmered like a promise she could not afford to believe. He placed the folder in front of her, his tone steady and precise. 3 months. You will attend 5 public events with me as my fiancée. You will maintain discretion, and above all, we keep this arrangement strictly professional." Claire's fingers brushed the edge of the document. The words blurred for a second. "Professional," she repeated softly. "Right. Nothing real." Julian watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "These are standard clauses. I made sure you are protected. You will have full access to a private apartment and an assistant to manage your schedule." "Why me, Julian? You could have anyone in this city sign this." His gaze flickered for just a moment. "Because you are the only person who told me no." That answer hung in the air. Claire blinked, unsure whether it was an insult or the strangest compliment she had ever received. She picked up the silver pen lying beside the contract. It was engraved with the logo Mercer, Co., its weight cool in her hand. Julian's voice lowered. "You do not have to do this." She hesitated. Then she remembered the sound of her mother's labored breathing over the phone, the hospital's invoices piling up like storm clouds. Yes, I do. The pen scratched against paper. Claire Dawson. Julian reached across and signed beneath her name. The act felt ceremonial, almost too calm for something that could alter both their lives. When he set the pen down, he said quietly, "Welcome to the arrangement." The next hour blurred into details and logistics. His assistant, a sharp woman named Evelyn, entered with a tablet and a rehearsed smile. "Miss Dawson, we will need your measurements for wardrobe, your schedule for etiquette training, and your consent for the press release. Mr. Mercer's engagement announcement goes live next Monday." Claire's head spun. "You are really announcing it?" Julian nodded. "Appearances must be convincing." As Evelyn left, Claire rose and walked to the glass window. The city spread below, glittering under the late afternoon sun. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked quietly. Julian's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. "It is not pretending when everyone expects the illusion," he said. She turned to face him. "That sounds lonely." He did not deny it. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring not extravagant, but elegant. Simple platinum with a faint line of blue light reflecting along its edge. "For the cameras," he said. "You will need to wear it whenever we are in public." Claire hesitated before sliding it onto her finger. The cold metal seemed to hum against her skin. "You even chose my size." "I pay attention," Julian said. Then, almost under his breath, "It helps in business." She smiled faintly, though her heart felt heavy. "Well, Mr. Mercer, looks like you have yourself a fiancée." He met her eyes. "Do not call me Mr. Mercer when we are together. It ruins the story." She swallowed. "Right, Julian." For the first time, a flicker of something unguarded passed through his expression. It was gone in a second, replaced by his usual calm. When she left his office, Claire carried two things: the signed contract in her bag, and the silver pen he had given her to keep. She turned it in her hand, watching the engraved logo catch the light. In the elevator, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls again. Same woman, same coat, but everything had changed. Somewhere between desperation and resolve, she had stepped into a world of perfect surfaces and hidden prices, and though she told herself it was only business, a small voice whispered a warning she tried to ignore. No contract stays clean once hearts get involved. The next few days passed in a blur of schedules and transformation. Claire Dawson had never known a world that moved this fast, or spoke this fluently in perfection. By the time she arrived at the penthouse for her first etiquette session, the skyline had turned to gold. The private elevator opened to reveal an entire team waiting: a stylist with racks of gowns, a posture coach, and a photographer adjusting his lights. Julian Mercer stood near the window, his sleeves rolled, his watch gleaming against the light. Claire hesitated at the threshold. "This feels like a movie I was not invited to star in." Julian turned, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You signed the contract. You are the leading role now." The stylist, a tall woman named Vivian, clapped her hands once. "Let us begin." "Claire, we will start with appearance and movement. You have to look like you belong in a boardroom and a ballroom at the same time." Hours slipped by as she tried on gown after gown, silk, velvet, chiffon, each one tighter, shinier, more expensive than the last. Vivian circled her like a hawk, adjusting fabric, tilting her chin. Posture. Eyes forward. No slouching, darling. Confidence sells the fantasy. When the final dress, a silver evening gown with a faint shimmer, settled perfectly on her frame, Claire hardly recognized herself in the mirror. "I look like someone else," she whispered. Julian's voice came from behind her. "You look like someone the world will believe in." She met his eyes in the reflection. There was something unreadable there, something almost protective before he looked away. The following days were filled with lessons. At the penthouse, a former diplomat taught her how to greet foreign investors. At a private restaurant, she learned which fork to use, which wine to refuse, and how to smile without revealing discomfort. Claire fumbled often, but she listened, absorbed, adapted. One afternoon, after another, exhausting rehearsal dinner, she dropped a napkin and bent to pick it up. When she rose, Julian was watching her, amused. You can stop practicing perfection. The world prefers authenticity anyway. She gave him a look. You might want to tell your board that. He laughed quietly. They would not understand. Her training culminated in a dress rehearsal for the upcoming charity gala. The ballroom was rented just for them, its chandeliers dimmed, a small group of staff pretending to be guests. Julian approached, extending his hand. May I? She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, steady, the pressure firm but not controlling. They began to walk through the room, following the steps Evelyn had outlined earlier: greeting, small talk, photo pose. But when their eyes met mid-turn, Claire lost her rhythm for just a second. You are overthinking again, Julian said softly, guiding her hand back to his arm. Just breathe. I am trying, she whispered, cheeks flushed. He leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. No one has to try to be real. For a moment, the space between them held something that was not written in any contract. It lingered, quiet and dangerous. When the session ended, the staff cleared the room. Claire reached for her coat, exhausted, but strangely alive. I never imagined I would have to learn how to exist in your world, she said, half smiling. Julian held the door open for her. And I never imagined someone would make it look effortless. She paused, unsure what to say. You mean that? He nodded once, almost reluctant. Yes. Good night, Claire. In the car ride home, she stared out the window, her reflection flickering in the glass. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, the same colors as her gown. Somewhere between the lies they had agreed on, a different truth was starting to form a dangerous one. For the first time, since signing that contract, Claire was no longer certain who was teaching whom. The night of the Hearts of Steel charity gala arrived like a storm wrapped in glitter. The city's elite filled the grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel, their laughter blending with the strings of a live orchestra. For Claire Dawson, every step felt like walking into another universe. Her gown was emerald silk, elegant and sharp, chosen by Julian himself. The diamond earrings, the champagne clutch, the gentle curl in her hair. None of it felt like her, yet every detail whispered perfection. The contract had said, appear confident, but it had not prepared her for hundreds of eyes watching her like she belonged. Beside her, Julian Mercer moved with quiet authority. His black tuxedo fit like armor, his presence commanding without a word. Cameras flashed the moment they entered the marble foyer. Reporters murmured, Julian Mercer and his fiancée, and the word fiancée hit her chest like a pulse she was not ready to claim. As they reached the main hall, Julian leaned closer and said quietly, just follow my lead. Smile when I smile. Speak when spoken to. Claire nodded. And if I trip, he glanced down at her heels, then I will catch you. The evening unfolded in calculated elegance. Toasts, laughter, and champagne floated through the air. When the host announced, please welcome Mr. Julian Mercer and his fiancée, Miss Claire Dawson. The spotlight followed them to the stage. Claire's pulse hammered as she took her place beside him. Julian began with practiced confidence, speaking about the foundation's mission to rebuild community centers across the country. Then the host handed the microphone to her. Miss Dawson, as Mr. Mercer's fiancée, what does the word home mean to you? Time stopped. The line had not been rehearsed. She saw Evelyn in the crowd, frozen, and Julian's faint look of warning. Claire took a breath, forcing her voice to stay steady. A home, she said, is not marble or glass. It is not where the walls shine or the floors never crack. It is where someone waits for you, even when you have nothing left to give. Silence filled the room. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Claire swallowed, feeling the heat in her cheeks. But then applause, first soft, then thunderous. People nodded, smiling. The host blinked in surprise. Julian turned to her, a hint of wonder in his eyes. It was not the look of a man maintaining an illusion. It was the look of someone seeing a truth he had forgotten. When they stepped off stage, he whispered, "That was not in the script." She smiled faintly. "Neither is life." The rest of the evening felt lighter. Guests approached her, genuinely moved by her words. A councilwoman praised her grace. A journalist requested a short interview. Claire navigated each moment with a calm she did not know she had. Later, as the gala began to thin, Julian found her, near the balcony, where she stood alone under the city lights. "You handled tonight better than most people I know," he said. "Thank you for not stopping me," she replied. He leaned against the railing beside her. "I thought about it, but I wanted to see where your heart would go." Her laugh was soft. "Dangerous experiment, Mr. Mercer." "Julian," he corrected gently. Their eyes met again, the air between them shifting. The orchestra below began a slow waltz, the notes rising through the open doors. Without thinking, he offered his hand. "Dance with me. No cameras this time." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His arm settled around her waist, guiding her with quiet confidence. They moved slowly, almost weightlessly, as if the noise of the world had dimmed. For a fleeting moment, the contract, the pretense, the rules, all disappeared. There were only two people suspended between truth and make-believe. When the music ended, Julian whispered, "For what it is worth, you made them believe in something real tonight." Claire looked up at him, her heart unsteady. "And what about you? Do you believe it?" He smiled faintly, but his answer never came. A photographer appeared at the door, calling for one last picture. Julian stepped back, his expression once again unreadable. As the flash went off, Claire realized she no longer knew which version of their story was real, the one they had written on paper, or the one unfolding quietly inside their hearts. The penthouse was quiet that night, its glass walls reflecting the city's silver lights. The gala was over, but Claire Dawson could still feel the rhythm of the waltz in her chest. She had returned to change out of her gown, but something inside her refused to settle. The applause, the way people had looked at her, the way Julian Mercer had looked at her, it all replayed in fragments she could not escape. She stepped out onto the balcony, the night wind cool. Against her bare shoulders, from here, the whole city stretched like a sea of stars, alive and endless. She heard footsteps behind her before she turned. Julian stood there, loosened tie, jacket gone, holding 2 glasses of wine. "I figured you could use this," he said. She took the glass and smiled faintly. "You always seem to appear when I am trying to breathe." "Maybe I just know where the air gets thin," he replied. His voice was softer than usual, stripped of the precision he carried in public. For a long moment, they said nothing. The city hummed below, a quiet symphony only they could hear. Then Julian spoke again, his tone careful. "You surprised me tonight." "How so?" "The way you spoke about home," he said. "It was not part of the plan, but it reminded me of something I used to believe in before everything became about numbers and expectations." She tilted her head, studying him. "You mean before you became Julian Mercer, the man who has it all?" He laughed under his breath. "Having it all is a myth, Claire. People like me spend half our lives trying to fill the spaces success cannot touch." She looked down at her wine. "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, and his honesty disarmed her more than any charm could. He turned toward the skyline, his voice low. "My father built this empire and told me to never let anyone become a weakness. Love was a distraction. Emotion was noise. I built walls instead of homes, deals instead of promises." Claire set her glass down. "And now?" Julian met her eyes. "Now I am beginning to wonder if the walls were the distraction all along." Her breath caught. The city wind carried the faint sound of traffic below. But up here, it felt like the world had stopped to listen. "Julian," she said quietly, "you do not have to keep performing. Not with me." He smiled, a real one this time, small and unguarded. That is dangerous to say to a man who built his life on pretending. She took a step closer, her heart steady but uncertain. Maybe it is time to stop pretending. The space between them narrowed, filled with words they could not speak. Julian reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered for a heartbeat before he drew it back. "If I forget this is a contract," he murmured, "will you remind me?" Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "I might forget too." They stood there, caught in something fragile and undeniable, until a distant thunder rolled across the horizon. The spell broke. Julian straightened his tie, his tone shifting back to something professional, though his eyes betrayed him. "Tomorrow, there is a press conference about the merger. I want you there," he said. "I will be there," she replied, steady once again. He nodded and turned toward the door. Before stepping inside, he paused. "Claire, thank you for reminding me what real sounds like." When he left, the balcony felt colder, but her heart did not. She leaned against the railing, watching the rain start to fall again. For the first time, she realized she was no longer pretending either. The walls Julian built were cracking, and part of her was afraid that when they finally broke, she would be standing inside them too. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. Voiceover AI Doctoric. ChatGPT Danoi. The next morning, the sky over the city was gray, heavy with rain that refused to stop. Claire Dawson arrived early at the Mercer headquarters for the press conference, clutching her folder of talking points, though her heart was not in the words. Last night still echoed in her mind the look in Julian Mercer's eyes, the way his voice had softened when he spoke about walls and loneliness. She told herself it meant nothing. But deep down, she knew that lie was starting to crack. When she entered the main lobby, the atmosphere was electric. Photographers waited behind velvet ropes. Assistants moved like chess pieces. Evelyn, Julian's efficient assistant, approached with her usual composure but a glint of tension in her eyes. "Claire, stay close to Mr. Mercer today. The board is watching every move." "I always do," Claire said quietly, adjusting the ring on her finger. But just as the cameras began to flash, a voice from the back of the room cut through the hum of conversation. "Miss Dawson, is it true you were fired from Leighton Designs for inappropriate conduct with a client, this very man?" The room froze. Claire's breath caught. Julian turned sharply, his expression darkening. Reporters surged forward with questions. Evelyn's phone buzzed violently. Someone had leaked the old accusation, the one that had cost Claire everything. Julian stepped toward the podium, trying to regain control. "This conference is about the merger," another reporter interrupted. "Then why did your fiancée delete her company profile last night? Is this relationship even real?" The words hit like shrapnel. Claire felt every eye turn toward her. She looked at Julian, searching for the strength she had seen in him before. But in that single second, she saw doubt hesitation flickering across his face. The damage was done. The board members murmured among themselves. Cameras flashed like lightning. Evelyn whispered urgently to Julian, but Claire could barely hear anything over the pounding in her ears. Julian finally spoke, voice tight. "This press conference is over." He guided her toward the exit, his hand hovering near her back but not touching. Outside, the storm had already begun to break over the glass canopy. She turned to him. "You knew this could happen, did you not?" "I did not expect them to go this far," he said. "Then you do not know them as well as you think," she replied, her tone trembling. "You built this world, Julian, and now it is crushing me." Before he could answer, she pulled the ring from her finger and pressed it into his hand. "You wanted a perfect story. I am not it." Then she walked into the rain, her silhouette swallowed by the gray morning. Julian stood still, watching her disappear, the ring glinting cold in his palm. For the first time in years, the man who always controlled every outcome realized he had finally lost something he could not rebuild. Rain swept over the city in waves, washing the streets until they gleamed like mirrors. Julian Mercer stood by the window of his corner office, watching the reflection of headlights blur across the glass. For the first time in his career, the phones in his office were silent. The merger deal, the one that had taken months of negotiation, was suspended. The board demanded an emergency review, and Claire Dawson was gone. Evelyn entered quietly, her voice careful. "The media will move on, sir, but the board is not forgiving." They want a public statement to protect the company. Julian turned away from the window. His voice was calm, but something inside it had fractured. Tell them there will be a statement. Mine. An hour later, the conference room was filled again. Executives, investors, reporters, the same faces that had watched him with admiration, now studied him with suspicion. Julian stepped to the podium without notes. Cameras whirred to life. He began simply, "Yesterday, I allowed fear to dictate my silence." The room fell still. "I built an empire to prove that emotions were weaknesses," he continued. "And in doing so, I forgot what strength actually means. Claire Dawson is not a scandal. She is not an illusion created for investors. She is the only honest thing that has crossed my path in years. And if the cost of telling that truth is this merger, then let it fall apart." Gasps rippled across the room. Evelyn's hand covered her mouth in shock. Reporters scrambled for sound bites. Julian took the silver pen from his jacket pocket, the same one Claire had used to sign the contract, and placed it on the table in front of him. "This contract began as a business arrangement," he said, voice steady now. "But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about profit. I am ending it not because it failed, but because I want something real." He turned and walked away before anyone could stop him. Outside, the storm had softened to a drizzle. He found Claire exactly where he had hoped she would be, sitting on a bench near St. Mary's Hospital, clutching her coat as the lights of the emergency wing flickered nearby. She looked up, startled. "Julian, what are you doing here?" "I told the truth," he said simply. "All of it. The merger is gone, and maybe my company too. But I could not let the world define you as a mistake." Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "You did not have to lose everything for me." He stepped closer. "I did not lose everything. I just stopped pretending that everything else mattered." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain dripped softly from the edge of the awning, the sound slow and steady like a heartbeat. Julian held out the pen she had once used. "I want to start over. No contracts, no rules. Just us, if you will let me." Claire stared at it, then at him. "You know, I never wanted your money," she whispered. "I know," he said. "That is why I am here." She took the pen from his hand and smiled faintly through the tears. "Then maybe this time we write something worth keeping." A year later, the city skyline looked different. The glass towers still reached for the clouds, but one building stood out, a sleek, modern structure with a small inscription at its base that read, "The Hayes Foundation for Community Architecture." It was the first joint project of Claire Dawson and Julian. Mercer built not for profit, but for people. Inside the new gallery wing, light poured through tall windows, washing over a display of sketches pinned on a white wall. They were Claire's early designs, rough, imperfect, human. Guests walked slowly through the space, their murmurs soft and reverent. At the center stood Julian, no longer the cold businessman of polished suits, but a man whose calm carried warmth instead of distance. Claire approached from behind him, her voice light. "You still show up early to your own events." He turned and smiled. "Old habits die hard. I used to arrive early to control everything. Now I just like watching it happen." She adjusted his tie gently, a simple gesture that said more than words ever could. "You did all this, Julian. You made something that gives back." He shook his head. "You did. I just stopped standing in the way." Reporters took a few photographs, but he waved them off. "No interviews tonight," he said, quietly. "This one is not about headlines." Later, as the crowd thinned, Claire found him on the rooftop terrace, where the city lights stretched endlessly below. The air was cool, the night alive with possibility. She held out the silver pen he had once given her, now slightly worn. "You forgot this in the office," she said. Julian looked at it for a long moment, then smiled. "I think it belongs to both of us now." He reached into his pocket and revealed a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was not a diamond, but a delicate band engraved with one line. No clauses, no signatures, just trust. He took her hand. "I tore up every contract I ever wrote, but I kept one promise to be honest with you. Claire, will you start our real story with me? Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. You already did. As the city lights shimmered below them, Julian slipped the ring onto her finger. The silver caught the glow of the skyline. The same color as the pen that had once sealed a contract and now sealed a vow. They stood together, no longer pretending, no longer defined by the deals that once ruled their lives. What began as a business arrangement had turned into something neither could have planned, proof that even the coldest empires could melt when love was real. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.